Hi, this is the conversation from the Corrine Woodman Gallery that is going to be accompanying the exhibit of the Art Center's AAP program, Residency. And this is a recorded talk. I will ask Claire Elam, who is the director of this program, to do the introductions.
Perfect. Thanks, Hester. Well, welcome to our artist talk. As Hester said, my name is Claire Elam. I am the Artist Accelerator Program Director. The Artist Accelerator is really a program designed to help emerging and established artists gain business education and knowledge to move themselves forward in their arts business. Part of that program is our artist in residencies we hold once a year, where between 4 and 6 artists have studio space, partially donated from the Downtown Corvallis Association. And they go through about a 16-week residency with us. They have lectures, they work on their own work, critiques, one-on-one coaching with me, as well as group discussions. So this exhibit is really a culmination of 4 months of extremely hard work, both artistically and in a business sense. I'm very excited to have all 6 of these artists with a wide array of work, as you'll see in the exhibit itself, and probably here today too. I'd like to have each of the artists introduce themselves, starting with Jill Myer.
My name is Jill Myer. I was actually born and raised in Missoula, Montana, and I live in Oregon. And I am in my garage this afternoon where it's a little chilly. Behind me is my encaustic painting work. I graduated from the University of Montana in 2000, and I have been dabbling in art ever since, but it wasn't until this Artist in Residency program that I was able to get really serious about an art career. And I'm really, really excited to have been a part of it and really just happy to be here.
Great. Citlalmina, why don't you go next?
Hi, my name is Celimina Riaz, and I'm in my studio that also doubles as my bedroom. I am currently a student at Lane Community College, and I'll soon be going to the College of Creative Studies in Detroit, Michigan. And I got to focus more in this program with photography than I kind of had been. And I'm really thankful for this program allowing me to do that, and also being able to meet and network with other artists and getting to know them.
Great, thank you. Jess, why don't you go next?
Hi, my name is Jess Felix. I am a ceramic artist. I do other stuff as well, but I've been focusing on this residency on my functional and sculptural work. I was born in Australia. I moved here about 7 years ago, and I graduated at the Victorian College of the Arts in Melbourne. I've kind of done art on and off, around kids and change of lifestyle, but I've always been fairly regular with making art and sculpture. So, but this residency program has been just amazing to have a studio space and take it a bit more seriously about the process of making pottery and working on my sculptural bust series that will be on show in our exhibition coming up next month.
Great, thank you. Eileen.
Hello, I'm Eileen Hinkle. I'm a painter, illustrator, and mural maker. I grew up in Corvallis, and I moved back just last year, and in between I lived down in South America for around 6 years, and that's where I learned how to paint murals and really took off running with that. And now coming back here, it's been really wonderful to be able to participate in the residency program because it gives us such a good amount of practical information about how to be working artists, which is something I was really looking for, and I've learned a lot from the program.
Thanks, Eileen. Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Rose. I'm a dancer, choreographer, and dance instructor here in town. I grew up in Corvallis. I started dancing at the age of 7. And then I went to Western Oregon University and got my Bachelor of Science in Dance. And then I've been working as a freelance choreographer and dancer since 2013. This residency has given me the opportunity to create a dance film. I work generally in the contemporary dance medium, and so I do some like musical theater.
Thanks, Caitlin. Cora, why don't you go?
Hi, I'm Cora Freya. I'm originally from Germany, close to the Dutch border. I moved to Corvallis about a year ago, and I sought the art center out just because I really wanted more community, since I don't know my way around yet. I've been living on and off in the States and in Germany, and I finished with a Bachelor in Fine Arts at the Artist Institute of Chicago. And I don't know if I mentioned that I paint and that I'm an illustrator also. And yeah, it's been really great connecting with everyone. And also the residency has also really helped me to explore my ideas a little bit further and see in what directions I want to go.
Great, thanks all. Hester, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Well, I think everybody already answered the questions I have, so we can go home. All kidding aside. Cora, just a question on the side. Where in Germany and how close to the Dutch border was that?
20 minutes from Venlo and Krefeld.
Okay. I am Dutch myself, so I was just sort of curious about that. So my first question is, why would you apply to a program like this? And you sort of answered that, but I'm trying to get to the point where you're sitting in your studio and you think, what the heck, let me apply for this. And why would you do that? Citlalmina, why don't you go first with that?
I actually applied to this program because I heard about it from one of my instructors at Lane last spring, and I heard some really good things about the program, but really the push came from a friend who was like, well, you never know if you don't try. And I had gotten some other information from Claire as being part of Arts Alive over the summer as well.
Mm-hmm. Were you an Arts Alive participant?
Yes.
Okay. Jess, so you said you've been working on and off with art, and what makes you apply to a program that doesn't necessarily deal with art? Well, deals with art, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had the Artist in Residency flyer up on my corkboard in my studio, which is also the lounge room. So it was always in my mind that I needed something kind of a structure like this to kind of push me forward into not just making art I can make, but how to, have a, talk with creative artists, how to improve my skills on social media, and, like how do I promote myself and learn more of business skills as well, I think. So I saw the Artist in Residency as well as the studio space, because I was slightly going nutty with all my kids running around, and I was like, I can only make so much art with people, even though I love children and I teach classes, you need to have your own space to make art. So I saw it as an opportunity to have a studio away, as well as just to have creative people that I can talk to about my art and have great critiques and learn more.
Yeah.
Business-wise.
So you not only wanted to have that business part, but the studio space was important too. Jill, you mentioned that you graduated in 2000 and you were sort of inactive, at least professionally, until this. So that's a fair amount of time. What was holding you back?
A lot of things, mostly myself. I so vividly remember in that kind of final wrap-up class of college when they're teaching you how to apply for galleries and all that sort of thing. I remember they gave us this statistic about how, only 10% of us would still be involved in the art world in 10 years. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I better go get a real job, because I didn't, as a 20-year-old, I had like this much self-esteem. And so they kind of told me I wasn't going to be a part of it. So I believed them and I went on with my life.
So how did you feel that they were telling you that at the end of your education as opposed to the beginning?
Yeah, I was a little bummed out. I was like, hey guys, this was information we should have had a long time ago. But I loved being an art student. I was definitely kind of with my people. And, we were the weird kids on campus with the dirty jeans and the paint in our hair. And I definitely fit there. And so that was kind of why I applied for the artist residency, is because I had started, I picked up paintbrushes again, just kind of in my free time. I was doing little doodles. I was doing pictures for friends. Nothing that I would call serious in any way. And then with COVID, I had all this time on my hands. And so I filled it with painting, and then more friends were asking for more paintings. And then I had a PayPal and more paintings. And I was like, this feels like it should be official somehow, but I don't know how to do that. And that's when I saw the residency. And to be perfectly frank, I had no understanding of just how much business they would teach us in the residency. But I'm really, really glad, because I needed it so much. But more than anything, I was just looking for my crowd of weirdos with paint in our hair. So that was my motivation.
So did your crowd of weirdness answer to your needs?
Absolutely. This is the most wonderful group of women that I've gotten to work with the last 4 months.
Eileen, so you're a Corvallis. You and Caitlin are the ones who are from Corvallis, I think, but you came back. So when you came back, did you think right away, I'm going to start my new Corvallis life with a residency program and I'll see after that? Or how did what made you apply?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was really interested in having more structure in terms of how I'm getting business and conducting business, especially around the Murals, which is a service I provide to businesses and organizations. And also, I was really excited about the idea of having a studio where I could paint all winter. That's kind of been a dream come true. I've never had my own personal studio before, and that's been really fun as well.
I forgot to start my clock here. So, Caitlin, the other Corvallis person, I'm curious how it is for a dance artist to apply to a program that is housed with a largely visual arts organization. What made you do the step?
Yeah, so I heard about the program through Arts Alive, actually. I participated through 10 Tiny Dances, and that's how I met Claire. And the program has been really helpful because Claire had gone to a school that had a lot of focus in dance, so she had some awareness of the dance world, and there is a lot of crossover when it comes to professional development that can work for visual arts that also works for dance and performance art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you get studio space?
I did get studio space. I used it a little bit. I also have access to studio space because I work as an instructor. So I did use the space in the art center a little bit, and I used some of the spaces that I had access to as well.
It was less of a motivation for you.
Yeah, that was, I was more interested in the professional development and kind of getting to work as what felt like a real artist. Going through college, I kind of felt like I had training wheels when it came to creating work, and this was kind of a good test run without the training wheels. So
mm-hmm. I think you're right there, probably. Cora, you'd been to pretty prestigious, don't forget to unmute yourself, to a pretty prestigious art school, and you ended up in Corvallis, which will be an entirely different story, but we won't go into that. And here there's this small little art center, and you thought, aha, this is my path to. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I also had been somewhat absent, if you will, from art for the last 4 years due to health-related issues. And I was sort of at crossroads whether or not I wanted to maybe take the next step and pursue this even further. And so as soon as I moved here, I searched for the closest artist community, and then that's how I found the Art Center. And I subscribed to the email, and that way I actually received the information in regard to this Artist in Residence program. And yeah, I mean, I just had to apply. And the reason why I did so is because I think the fact that it is also very business oriented gave me sort of almost an excuse to take it a step further. I rented my own studio, and I guess in regard to your question, being in Chicago, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of artists. It's sometimes a bit tricky to even find yourself then because there's so much input. So I really do like this smaller community, and the community with all the artists in residence as well right now also. It's just a different kind of focus, I think, for me anyway. And also, even though I learned a lot about different kinds of art, we never really discussed the business aspects of things. So that's been really lacking, yeah. I remember we had one grant writing class maybe, so the factor that I can learn about business etiquette more, it's a big factor.
Yeah. Citlalmina, you mentioned that you go to Lane Community College, but also Creative Studies in Detroit. So you are part of 2 artist communities.
Well, I'll be attending the College of Creative Studies in the fall. So currently I'm at Lane.
Are you going to go physically there?
Yes, I'm actually in the process of finding a home and moving out there.
So what was the impetus of that? Was that you wanted to know more about your medium, or you learned through both Lane and the residency program that you required more education?
I actually thought to myself that I needed some more education. It was another reason why I came and applied for the residency. The other thing is that I had always wanted to live in Michigan. So I researched the art schools out there and just to see what the different communities had to offer. And right now, the Detroit area is going through kind of a renaissance. And I figured, why not try? I'm just one of those people that's just like, why not try? I'm not from Oregon, I'm from California. So even when I moved up here, it was kind of like, why not? Let's see what happens.
How hard could it be? Famous last words. You mentioned you're a photographer, but also a poet.
Yes, a photographer, also a poet. I really liked writing my poem for this particular project, for this residency. It's a lot of my poetry is very close to my heart, but this is one of the things I've written that's not directly about me or about something but it is about something that has affected me, but I've taken other people's stories and just put them all together in one poem to go with the photos.
So what do you feel is the business of being a poet? Poets, we always think you're in the clouds with your mind.
I think one of the things about the business of poetry or being a poet is that everything that you do is so personal. And that for me, it can be hard to put a price on that.
Well, did you hear, and I have to admit her name escapes me right now, but our young poet laureate at the
inauguration, yes, the Youth Poet Laureate. It was a very beautiful poem. Her whole story is pretty remarkable, though, as a poet in general. And the fact that she was writing that poem as the things were happening at the Capitol without any prompting, because she was already in the midst of it when it started happening. Her words were very powerful, I think. And I like seeing that more youth are being recognized in that way, in an artistic way, than someone that maybe is, more older and seasoned.
I like that you say seasoned, being the old fart in this this company. I do want to ask you something about your work, though. You mentioned not only are you a photographer and a poet, but you combined the two. Is that a general? Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how you feel that poetry and photography are good fits.
I think that poetry and photography are a good fit because they can tell a broader story. They can give you more depth to the story, that the words can give more depth to the story that the pictures are telling. And it kind of, especially when there's photographs of more than one person or more than one scene, you can feel how they all tie together, even though they might be different. So it's, for me, the photography and the poetry is all about storytelling. That's why I like my photography is more of a documentary style photography versus just like regular portrait photography or regular landscape kind of photography. There's always a story behind it. Even if there's not a story per se initially, when you can add a poem to a picture, it creates a story.
Yeah, I can entirely see that. Eileen, I'd like to ask you, you mentioned you were excited about getting a studio. What is a mural artist doing in the studio, and how does the residency program help you with that?
I would say one of the most practical reasons is that murals can't really be painted while it's raining. So I'm in here hiding from the rain. And the other thing is that I work with acrylic paints, which is pretty similar to the kind of paint that I use in murals. So my goal to work on canvases is to develop further my style and themes that I'm working on, and then to later be able to use that and translate it back to murals. So I see that they're very interconnected and complement each other pretty well, actually.
And what is the scale of the work that you make in your studio?
You can see on the back wall, that's one of the paintings I did that will be in the show. So about 2 by 4 feet, or these other ones over there are new. So small to medium canvases.
Mhm. Jill, you mentioned that you're in your studio / garage, and it's very nippy.
It's a little cold.
So what is the residency program doing for that?
Well, I didn't necessarily take advantage of or use the studio space provided by the residency because I am actually in Newport as well, just over those little mountains. But it did provide a great place for me to stop and use the restroom when I was grocery shopping in Corvallis. But more than that, it was getting to know the people. Like I said before, I wanted the residency for the other artists and those relationships.
So how did that work this year when we had COVID restrictions? You didn't have the same opportunity to get together as previous years have been.
No, well, we did so much via Zoom anyway, so that was actually fairly easy for me. And I believe Citlalmina is also not in Corvallis, and so I think that actually made it a little easier on us. I think we kind of timed it so that like every other week or every 3 weeks I drive to Corvallis for a distanced in-person meeting. And it worked really well.
You primarily know faces and busts, basically.
Yeah.
People have no bodies and no legs.
Exactly, but we all have phones and we all have technology, and we've been messaging and keeping in touch and sending photos and asking opinions, and it's still that I received what I was looking for in the, hey, I'm working on this and it's not quite working and I know what I want, but I can't get it there. What am I missing? And 2 or 3 other voices, that, and oh, yes, that, so that's those other artistic opinions.
So Cora, you also mentioned you were looking for that artist community moving here recently. So how did the residency work for you in that respect? And how did that contact come about?
I mean, wonderfully. I'm so glad I applied and got the chance to participate. I mean, moving here, I have family here, but other than that, there wasn't a lot of contact. And then of course the timing with COVID, I mean, there wasn't even a possibility to even go to a museum or anything like that, right? So I was very isolated therefore, and yeah, it's kind of impossible to get to know a city or the cultural vibe or anything like that. So I had absolutely no idea. And I'm pleasantly surprised because I really appreciate how every artist here cares deeply about their work and is addressing very relevant topics, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you feel that although this is a relatively small community, it definitely pointed you in a direction that you like.
Yeah, I would say quality over quantity, pretty much. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
At least from a German person.
Yeah.
Jess, so how did being part of this community work for you?
I think it's well, it was just so helpful to be in. For me, well, studying the art space underneath the art center. The ceramic studio is down at the bottom, so they have a kiln there. And I can have a break and go upstairs and look at the gallery is also helpful. But having regular Zooms with wonderful women artists who are, we're all kind of figuring stuff out and helping each other understand certain things. I think it's just been really good to be connected.
Yeah. Your work sort of responds to COVID by being busts, but I don't think it is related.
No, but you know, I will sit in my studio, and when I'm lonely, I'll look at the busts that are around the room and go, "Oh, hi, Rachel, hi, Greta," kind of thing, you know. So yeah, maybe it does.
Yeah.
Not intentionally.
So, Caitlin, how does it feel to be part of this cohort that is mostly visual? There is a poet there, but it's also a visual artist. How? And I'm not saying that dance isn't visual, because it is, but in a very different way. How did that collaborate? If it was collaborate, no, probably not. How did that work?
Yeah. It was nice just being around other artists. I think that we all have like a different energy than like regular people. I think we all think a little bit differently. So it's nice to kind of like commune with each other and have that connection. I really enjoyed seeing their perspective of my work, because it was so different from getting like a critique from another dancer. It was good to see like what they had thought of things.
Could you mention an example of what they picked up on that a dancer wouldn't say anything about, or vice versa?
I think they picked up more on like the abstract of things, and some of the smaller things. Like I remember Jess had mentioned something about like hands that I had done in a work, and how it reminded her of like a nervous church lady, because my work is about religious trauma. So that is something that like maybe a dancer would have picked up on, but the fact that she could take it and then relate it to something that wasn't about dance, that was just like something she'd seen in her own life, possibly. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you also, you can think about it, one more question, and then I would like to talk a little bit about your actual work that you've been doing for this exhibit. What was the least expected effect of the program? Something you hadn't expected, but still happened. Is that, does that make sense, that question? Yeah, Jill is nodding, so I'm going to start with you, Jill.
The question makes sense because, as I said previously, I didn't, when applying, I didn't fully grasp just how much business, you know, how deep the business focus would be. And so I think for me, the most unexpected part of the residency was how hyper-focused I would become on things like getting business cards printed, creating a website, taking additional classes on time management for creatives, and how I just like did such a deep dive. I've never taken myself this seriously before, if that's an okay way of saying it. And it's been really wonderful and amazing, and I'm just so grateful for the program as a whole, and for kind of opening up this door for me of like, oh, well, hey, that's where I should have been. So
does anybody have a similar experience? Jess, I see you nodding.
Yeah, like definitely what Jill said about just the learning experience. Like there's just so much to learn, and that throughout the residency, it's like, you know, the next week it's a different topic, the next week it's another thing about budgets, or you know, or social media or something, and you can really dive down deep into that. And it was good because the residency for me felt like it held that information, and you know, Claire.
Was that unexpected for you?
That was unexpected in how thorough it was, in like getting the recordings of those workshops back, so I can go back to it at a time that suits me, I think that really, really has helped me, and that I can still delve into those resources that the art center has given us.
Okay. Eileen, you also had something to mention, I think.
Yeah, similar to Jill, I wasn't really expecting so much practical knowledge. I kind of had this idea going into it, like, oh, I'm gonna have a studio space and get to paint all winter, but I'm really grateful for the business part. I think Claire at one point in the early meeting said a working artist spends 30% of time making art and 60% doing everything else that comes with running a business, which is what being an artist is at the end of the day. And that was new information to me. And
you want to run?
Maybe briefly, but then I was like, okay, we're doing it. And it makes sense, because maybe during this time I've actually spent more than 60% of the time on the practical stuff. But I know it's worth it, because that's setting me up like for the longer term, being able to make my art practice a career, basically.
Yeah. Cora.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with everything that everyone said beforehand. I also am actually very surprised about how little it felt like a chore to me. I thought it would be a little bit more, like I was kind of dreading that aspect a lot. And even though it is a lot to take in, it didn't feel, I didn't feel weighed down basically by it, but more, I guess empowered.
So Jill mentioned that she was taking other classes now. Does anybody else had that happening for them? So, now I want to take bookkeeping for advanced.
I mean,
something like that.
All these classes are, I think, Instagram, I guess, websites, how to set up certain shops online.
Caitlin, you were already an instructor when you started this program, which, truth be told, is what a lot of artists do to pay the bills. But you still felt, what was the most unexpected effect of this program for you?
Yeah, for me, it was the fact that I got a test run of basically being an artistic director of a company. A lot of my time was not just spent in the studio, like rehearsing. It was spent organizing my dancers, like finding a cast, finding a location to shoot, kind of directing and working with my cellist and poet, who both created work for me. So it was, I realized that I got like a much broader experience of like creating a work than I normally would. So I think that was pretty unexpected, of like figuring out how much work it takes outside of just the studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and Citlalmina, was that your experience as well? The least expected effect of the program was the business side and how much time it takes?
Not so much the time. Like, I kind of expected that because, I knew someone who had gone through the program, but I didn't realize like how deep the business part would run into the program, like how much information we would get. And I actually, started my website because of being in the residency, and that was something I wasn't sure about doing. I had like, artists sometimes were like, well, do I really need that? Am I ready for that? But I just felt like it gave me that little bit of push that I needed to go forth with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having a website is a great way for curators to see what the heck you're doing. And especially if you keep it maintained. So now I'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about your actual work, so that we talk a little bit about art after all. Caitlin, I was very curious to hear dancers, a cello, a poet. Tell me about the work that you've created for this residency or during this residency.
I created a dance film about religious trauma. I commissioned a cello piece from a local cellist. He's worked professionally. And the poet, she's more of like a singer-songwriter actually. And we took one of her songs that she had written a few years ago and kind of reworked it to, it was a very like, I'm in my victimhood kind of song. And so we reworked it to be a little bit more powerful. And then I worked with 8 local dancers.
So your piece is very collaborative.
Yeah. It was a little bit of a Merce Cunningham moment, because with the music, I didn't hear it until 2 weeks before we started filming. And so the dance just had to be made without music. And I think that's the first time I've done that. So it was a different process, and it was a little bit challenging for my dancers as well, because they all were so used to having choreography set to music. So
Would you do it again? In this way?
I would, yeah. I think it depends on the musician and the topic, but I think I would.
Okay. So Citlalmina, your work is a collaboration with yourself.
Hester?
Can you, yeah?
Sorry, really quickly. Can Caitlin explain who Merce Cunningham is for those visual artists who don't know?
Yeah. Merce Cunningham.
Quickly.
Yeah, can we back up a little bit? Yeah. Merce Cunningham is a modern dancer and choreographer from, I think he emerged in the 60s or 70s. And his whole thing was doing chance dance. So he would create movement, and then he would have another musician create music. Sometimes it was like really abstract and kind of like formless. He would also sometimes just roll dice to decide what the dance was going to be. And then a lot of times on the day of the show, that's when the dancers and musicians would get together, and that was when they formed the dance. So it was all just like a collision of music and dance, and sometimes visual art as well.
Yeah, he comes out of a generation of artists that got funded to go to school through the GI Bill just after the war.
Mm-hmm.
And Jasper Johns is a contemporary of his, and Rauschenberg is a contemporary of his. So you have to place it sort of in that group. When I say after the war, it took them to the 60s and maybe early 70s to become big names. That wasn't happening right away. It is a great example of government support for the arts that actually works out. This is my private hobby horse or whatever. Citlalmina, back to you. You are collaborating with yourself with poetry and photography.
Yeah, so this particular project, I actually kind of went into my small community that I know of local veterans to hear their stories and take their photos. And it's funny that you should talk about the GI Bill supporting the arts. Me going to Detroit to school is being funded by the VA because I'm a veteran. So it's kind of interesting how that all kind of ties together. I don't really know a lot of people in Eugene to collaborate with art, like, to work on something with. I I had a couple ideas. Had I known people, I would have maybe went a little bit different. But what I'm working on is so close to me, and some of these stories are so personal that I do know that some of them probably wouldn't allow somebody to come along with me into their home to hear their stories, to see how they're living, and to see the people that they're living with. So I think it worked out to his benefit to just kind of work by myself this time.
So how is it straddling art and documentary?
I actually think that in the right setting with the right people, it can work well together. There's only one particular photo that I took that was sort of staged to give it a little bit of artistic value, but it's not anything that was out of the norm for that particular person's day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Okay. Jess, I alluded to the fact that you are making busts. Tell us a little bit about the body of work you want to show.
So I've been working on this series for a while now. It's a series of ceramic busts of women that have, I guess, their story has inspired me and many other people. They're climate activists and they're around the environment and scientists. So I've got a few different famous women that I've studied their faces and listened to their podcasts and stories and tried to kind of tribute their, essence into the clay, I guess, in some ways. And it's kind of come out differently, but it's, I guess the thing that might tie it all together, these 4 women in particular, I guess, is their persistence when it comes to, helping improve their environments or helping bring attention to climate change.
Climate change is going to be an exhibit in the fall of 2021, so keep your eyes open. Eileen, could you tell us, are you preparing for a particular mural during this winter, or are you just creating an alphabet or images that you can potentially use in the future?
I'm not creating paintings for a particular mural that I have in mind, although I always have some locations or ideas that I'd love to paint, and I'm just waiting for the right moment for that to happen. But it's more about diving deeper into like the themes I'm interested in and the techniques, different ways of painting, and just being able to explore that in a way that is not under the eye of the public is really nice. One thing that I really like about murals, and also can be a little tiring, is that everyone who sees it, kind of wants to talk with you about it or wants to share their opinion or their reaction, which can be nice. And also when you're trying something out for the first time, can be a little nerve-wracking. So it's been really nice to just have my own space to play around and figure things out in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what attracted you to murals specifically, because it creates a whole different set of demands.
I think public art is super important. I was drawn to it because I really think there's a lot of value in getting art into places where people can see it and taking it out of the historic spaces that art is contained in, which generally tend to be quite elitist, such as museums and galleries. The majority of the population doesn't actually visit galleries or museums. So for me, it's kind of a almost even a political act of bringing art to people in their daily lives, as opposed to expecting them to seek it out and discover it.
Is your subject matter political as well?
Not often. It has been. It depends on the circumstances. Each mural has a different set of circumstances, and I decide what I'm going to paint based on where it's located, who's going to see it. If there's a sponsor, they often have some input. So it's based on a lot of things. I do like making political art, but it's not always possible.
What's the biggest challenge in a mural?
Oh, the biggest challenge depends. It can be related to the surface, because that varies from wall to wall, or if it's for a client, they can have, it can be challenging to translate their idea effectively into a visual format.
What is your least favorite structure to work on?
Oh man, cinder block is not very fun.
I thought you would start saying brick, but it's probably very similar.
Yeah, I haven't actually painted on brick much, but I'm sure it wouldn't be challenging.
It's probably blocks, cinder blocks on steroids.
Yeah.
Is my feel. So Jill, what's the biggest challenge in your work?
So I've never actually looked at my work this way before. I've always looked at it head on, and I guess I didn't realize I only used orange and blue. I've got a bunch of other colors on my palette, but apparently that's all I use. But for the gallery or the show that's going to be hung in the gallery as part of the residency, I think Eileen gave it such a good, I had this idea, like, it's a gallery, it's fancy and it's special, and that orange and blue just aren't going to fly in the gallery. And my work is very much focused on the environment. This is all just the ocean behind me. I love the ocean. I love being in the woods. I love being outside, and conservation and protecting the environment is very important to me. And so when I was thinking about this upcoming show and the work I would make for it, I was out in the woods, I was hiking, and it was fall, and so there's all these dead plants, and I was thinking about preservation, and I was like, ooh, I work in wax. I can like dip these and preserve them, and it would be so neat. And then I started thinking about shadows, and I kind of went, I guess, away from the environment as a subject matter, and really just kind of went into, I'm hanging my work in this super fancy place and I want it to look awesome. And so my work is really just kind of a blank canvas with some sort of beautiful dipped plant life that I found, and the different shadows that will cast throughout the day, and just kind of playing with that idea that art could change and move and be a little more fluid, and just be a little different. It was a totally different direction, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. All right. Cora, the body of work that you want to share in the Corrine Woodman Gallery. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, so this, it's a triptych that is split up in uneven parts, and it is autobiographical. It's an oil painting, and the challenge for me was to step away from my classical training, and I wanted to combine elements that I grew up with and landscapes that I grew up with I guess, well, telling some sort of story anyway about myself through landscape, if that makes any sense. And it was interesting when Eileen was talking about murals and galleries, museums being not accessible to the public, because the places where I grew up, there was a lot of graffiti always, and for me it was, and I kind of started with that in a way. And to me, it was always also absurd to think that this didn't count as a gallery, pretty much. And I was always very fascinated by the shapes and the abstraction of things, and the fact that it wasn't anymore about the artist, but about the, I guess, work itself. So that has been the biggest challenge, to try to combine maybe graffiti-like elements into forms or shapes that people can still associate something with. So this piece was one of the, it was a great learning experience, pretty much. And throughout the residency also, I kind of found my way back into more political or historical subject matter. So I'm currently working also on a series which hopefully part of it I might be able to show during the opening.
Do you feel that you were able through focused attention during the residency to meet that challenge that you set yourself?
Yes. I think what the residency also did for me was to literally do an inventory. That's one of the first things that Claire suggested for me to do, which is such, if you think about it, a simple thing, but I guess I never did that. I never thought about it. So to see all my paintings and to see what the subject matter is in retrospect of maybe 10 years was pretty mind-blowing. And even like Jill just said, realizing the color usage, or, you know, things that I tend to go towards too. So in that regard, yeah, I think it's been successful, just simply because it really stirred me into, I feel like I'm more in my authentic direction now.
Mm-hmm. Was there a lot of similarity in the paintings over those 10 years? What did you learn from comparing those 10 years of works?
To each other? Or what did I learn from it? Well, yeah, as I said, there are certain maybe vocabulary that I tend to go towards too, as in regard to subject matter, or maybe like material application, which was or is extremely useful, because that way now I can either decide if I will continue going down that path, or if I will, you know, experiment with other things more with a greater awareness, pretty much. And also, yeah, the subject matter, I realized in like looking back, has always had some sort of connotation to loss and a historical display of the female figure in history and politics. So that's something that I really want to dive into now, which I'm excited about.
Did any of you, again, through the opportunity of focusing yourself on this residency for a while, change directions dramatically? Anybody?
Yeah, I guess I can say that, definitely.
Yeah.
I was very much focused on, I guess classically trained, it sort of went into my work, and it's kind of hard to step out of that again. And then, you know, differentiating between maybe the things that you're taught at art school, what the expectation of the audience is, or the place that you want to display at, versus what it actually is that you want to do. So that's a huge gain for me.
Citlalmina, did this residency make it clearer for you that you are wanting to pursue photography more, or poetry, or always make that an intertwined medium for you?
I really think it just solidifies my desire to keep them mostly intertwined. Even if it's just some poetry, like a series of poems that go along with one or two photos, and not necessarily, you know, a poem per photo. it did solidify that I want to learn more experimental processes and how to build the equipment I need to do those things when the weather doesn't cooperate. Like it was kind of doing throughout this, because initially I was going to do the cyanotypes with the poetry, but the weather didn't cooperate and I didn't have the tools I needed to build the box I needed for the cyanotypes at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Eileen, what is, can you point to a work in this body of work that you say, yeah, that's the one, that is the one that really I'm most satisfied with? Or you have to unmute.
Yeah, so this one over there on the wall is the first.
Two figures with the blue background?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the first final piece that the first few months I was doing studies of details of that piece in order to kind of figure out how I wanted to paint the final one. So I'm pretty satisfied with it, how it came out. And now I'm working on a second piece that is the same size as that one, that goes together. The two pieces go together and are in conversation with one another, basically.
Mm-hmm. Jess, what was your biggest challenge in working at the Art Center? And is there one of the figures that you say, yeah, that's the one I will never sell? That is mine.
Yeah, I think, well, glazing, it's, the experimentation with all the different glazes. There was one particular one that was meant to be blue, and I put it next to a rust color as a interactive pigment, and it turned out orange. So it was completely different color to what I envisaged it. And yet it still works, and it still is interesting. So it's a lot of.
So is it a happy accident or?
So some of them got cracks. That's never a happy accident. But that glaze, yeah, I think so. It turned out great. I mean, I love things that surprise me. So, and things that aren't meant to. Yeah. So I'm happy with that.
Caitlin, does anything like happy accidents exist in dance?
Yes, all the time, actually. I work a lot in happy accidents. I think that sometimes when, a lot of times I'll come up with a base phrase of movement, and then I'll take like little pieces of things and kind of change them. So if something was a jump, maybe I'll turn it into something that's on the floor. And I'll make different people do different versions of things. And then sometimes things just like happen, and like there's moments that you see like these connections between dancers, and it sometimes turn out really beautifully. So I work a lot in happy accidents.
Jill, a different question. I think in this context, I'm not going to, I cannot really ask for, would you do this again? But because you're going to say yes. But what is it that you would recommend to a friend to say, do this program? Citlalmina had a friend say you should do this. What would you say to a friend?
I think anyone who is stuck in that romantic notion of I'm a starving artist, with this information, I don't feel like I'm going to go hungry and I can do art. And I just, yeah, I can't recommend it enough. Like there's so many reasons I feel like I'm going to start repeating myself. But I think also for myself, I have a confidence that I didn't have before in applying to galleries, in applying to programs. putting myself out there with a website and and the big one, I think the most valuable is knowing what my artwork is worth per square inch. Like that was a formula that Claire went over with us, and we worked on budgets and spreadsheets, and that level of confidence that I can say, oh, this piece is this much money, and not like, oh, whatever you want to pay me for it, whatever you think it's worth. Like that's night and day in just 4 months. So I think that level of confidence in knowing my value, the value of my work.
Well, I think so. You learned a lot about business. You got more confidence, and you liked having studio space and a concentration of work. So I'm going to go to my closing question of what if money and space would not be of any consideration? What artwork would you like to own? Who likes to go first? Citlalmina.
Yeah, if money and space were an issue, I would like to own the Aztec sculpture that's a double-headed serpent, and right now it's at the British Museum in London. It's an Aztec sculpture that was made in the 15th or 16th century, and it's mostly turquoise.
Oh, wow.
It's really, I mean, you can look it up online. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind owning anything out of the archaeological, is it archaeological museum in Mexico City? For anything there. Who would like to go next to this question? Oh, I'd like to, Citlalmina, is that a purely aesthetic choice, or is it also a cultural choice? I'm looking at your middle name, and
both my first and middle name are Nawa, which is the original Aztec language. It's both. Mm-hmm. It's both. It's cultural and aesthetic. I think it's really beautiful. And, just knowing a little bit of history about, how it was obtained by the British Museum, I think it would be realistically something I would like to own for a period of time and then give back to Mexico, in this dream world.
Okay. Well, if you need a letter of recommendation, we'll write you one.
Okay, thank you.
On this. So Jess, it was Jess, right? The next one in line.
Oh, I don't know. Mine would be something different every day, I think. I don't know. Someone else.
Okay. Who would like to step up? Caitlin.
This is actually a musical work. The album Beach Music by Alex G. Sandy. I want it in a more practical sense because I would love to do a whole show to that entire album. The music is really interesting, and all of the connection between one song to the next is really interesting, and I think it could just make for a wonderful show. So,
how essential is music for dance? You would think, well, that's a stupid question, but you mentioned you made this dance without music, and you wouldn't be the only one who does dance without music or music that is later coming. So how essential is it that you would have the music?
For me, it's pretty essential. I think that it can really elevate pieces. I also think that it can be a deterrent. I think sometimes people get too caught up in the music for certain pieces, or it can overtake the movement. So for me, I really love having a good piece of music to go with my work, but I'm starting to kind of go away from that a little bit and challenge myself to work without music a little bit more.
As a person who cannot dance 2 steps in a row and is also pretty amusical, I used to subscribe to going to the ballet, and one of the things that I really loved in it was that it could explain each other. You know, the music became easier for me to understand because I saw the dance, and vice versa. So for a non-musical person, it is pretty essential.
Yeah.
Jill, what would you like to own?
I'm having a hard time deciding. If money were no object, I think I would just move to Paris and live in the Musée d'Orsay. I know I'm saying that wrong. With all of those Impressionist artists. And I say that because Monet's lily pads, when I first saw that as a preteen, that was like when the penny dropped of like, I love art. It was just like such a pivotal moment for me. And I remember like I had to have that poster in my room. I got a little daily diary journal with that on the cover. I didn't need a journal. I didn't need a date diary at that time. But everything had to be like, I had pencils. I made my mom order them from the Smithsonian gift shop, like the pencils with the lily pads on it. Like everything had to be lily pads for a long time.
Eileen, would you like to own something?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's so many different things. But I know that one painting that really just had a huge impact on me was The Raft of the Medusa by Géricault, a French painter. And it's the size of a wall. So back then, a lot of times, you know, they were painting mural-sized paintings on these massive canvases. So you stand in front of it and you're just immersed in the image, which is really amazing. And then because it's such an intense and kind of dark, it's a scene of like a shipwreck, and it's the people that are floating on this raft after the shipwreck. So actually what Jill said, I'd like to have that in a room across from Monet's massive lily pad paintings, because that's also water, and it's, I think those two
different.
Yeah, show the different sides of, you know.
You're getting greedy.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank you on so many levels, being brave enough to become a resident and partaking in this program, to being an artist, to wanting to be an artist, to make work, to give us your time now in this talk. So that we learned a little bit more about the program, but also about you as artists. So I have one more question. Who of you is going to submit to Call to Artists of the Art Center for the Corrine Woodman Gallery just on your own, or the Around Oregon Annual? Hands up. All right. Thank you so much. Back to you, Claire.
I don't have too much to add. Thank you, guys, for joining us today. I'm looking forward to your exhibit and seeing all of your works hung in an official capacity and not just on Zoom or through pictures. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Okay.